All right. Happy Wednesday. I'm here with Sister Natasha Pierre. Obviously, I just said your name, but could you sit here and tell us who you are and what exactly that you do?
Sure. So thank you, Natasha Pierre. I'm many things, but what I am most commonly known for right now in this season of my life is being a mental health educator and advocate. I share openly about my own mental health journey and how I support not only people who are living with mental illness and mental health challenges, but also how I support and help their families, work with law enforcement, all of our first responders, teachers, because mental health and mental illness is something that doesn't discriminate. It affects all of us and can affect all of us. So that's primarily what I do. I'm also an author, two-time author, keynote speaker, panelist, trainer, life coach, career coach, emotional intelligence coach, a lot of things. But all of what I do really stems from my desire for everyone to understand that mental health is health and that it's the foundation on which we must build our lives.
Okay. So, you know, I see your last name is Pierre. I want to assume, I'm assuming that you're from the Caribbean. You're from the Caribbean.
I am.
Um,
Yes, I
so,
am. No, yeah, I am from the Caribbean. Frequently asked if I'm French, and to my knowledge, I'm not directly French, but the Caribbean was colonized by many different countries. I was born and raised on St. Thomas Virgin Islands, so I didn't come to America until I came for college. My parents are Trinidadian. My grandparents are, Venezuelan, Grenada, indigenous, Hispanic, all of that. So I am a Caribbean girl first.
so you are a mental health advocate. Like, what is the view of mental health from a Caribbean background? Like, how do your family look at it? Like, yeah, I think it is. I think.
I think in the Caribbean, and that's for people of African descent, um, Hispanic descent, Portuguese descent. I'm just gonna group it all. People of color, Black and brown people, all of that, indigenous. Mental health isn't something that was discussed frequently for me growing up. And only in, I'd say, the last couple of years is it something that is being discussed, being, first of all, that people are open to discuss. And I think that's with more people sharing their story and seeking resources and no longer being content with suffering in silence and remaining in the shadows. It's something that's being discussed now. But, across the African diaspora, mental health isn't a topic of conversation. And it's mainly because we shy away from admitting vulnerability, admitting what appears to be a weakness, admitting anything that would allow us to look and present as frail, faulty, vulnerable again. And, I understand why. It's because we've always got to appear strong for the rest of the world, but it hasn't done us a good service. And so I'm happy that we're talking about it more now.
So, I appreciate you giving that response.
Mhm.
Could you, obviously we're here to sit here and talk about mental health. Can you sit here and, tell us about your journey when it comes to mental health and what led you on this path?
In hindsight, I know that I was dealing with depression and anxiety at least from age 9. And I know it because I have journals from that age and school assignments. I had one assignment in high school where I wrote a poem and spoke about wanting to jump off a building. So in hindsight, I know how early the depression and anxiety began for me. But I wasn't diagnosed until later on in life. I wasn't diagnosed until after I left college. Now, throughout my elementary school and junior high, high school, even college, there were incidents and moments where I can now see that was anxiety, that was depression, that was a panic attack. But because we didn't have the language back then, people weren't talking 20 years ago, people weren't talking about mental health, mental illness, anxiety, depression, panic in the ways that we discuss it now. You know, bipolar disorder was called manic depressive back then. It was the crazy disease. There's something wrong with you. You lock those people away in an attic and, you know, you just bring them food 2 or 3 times a day. I was diagnosed early 2021, and it was really as a result of 9/11. After 9/11, I was in New York at that time modeling, and had just moved there. The attacks happened, and I went through about 6 months of fainting all over New York City. And it was bizarre because I went to every doctor and they told me that you're fine. Your brain is fine, your lungs are fine, your heart is fine, you're fine. And then finally, one doctor suggested that I see a psychiatrist. And I was like, what does that have to do with me fainting? You know, again, back then we weren't talking about mental health the way that we do now. When I finally saw that psychiatrist, you know, she said that I was experiencing survivor's guilt. What? What is that? Survivor's guilt is when you experience an event that where many people lose their lives or someone loses their life, but yet you're still living. And it made sense to me because people kept telling me, oh, you know, God still has a purpose for you to be here and your work isn't done yet. And I understand what they were saying and how they were trying to comfort me. However, on the flip side of that, what you're saying is thousands of people, their purpose was over in that instant. And I couldn't reconcile the ways people wanted to comfort me with what I was really feeling, which is sadness. And it presented like anxiety and panic. And back then, and a bit still now, when panic shows up for me, I faint. You know, I had one doctor said that it's like I am an iron, and when I get too hot, there's an automatic shut off. My automatic shut off is fainting. So that began a journey where I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 2, ultradian, which basically means I can go between depression and hypomania several times a day. Some people do that several times a year, but for me, it's been several times a day. Generalized anxiety, panic disorder. Of course, depression comes with bipolar disorder. And then EDNOS, which is an eating disorder not otherwise specified, which means I wasn't not eating because I wanted to be thin. I was not eating because I was paranoid that someone was trying to poison me. And then, of course, PTSD, not only related to 9/11, but other experiences in my life and growing up in the Virgin Islands, hurricanes. So all of that, uh, it was a jambalaya of diagnoses. And I know I have people that ask me, you know, were they all true? Were they all showing up in your life? Yes. And there were times in my life where I was on medication for all of it.
Appreciate your vulnerability. So
Mhm.
how do you know, ever since you were, given your diagnosis and just experiencing the things that you experienced, how have they impacted your relationship with others? Have they not impacted your relationship with others? Like, how do you navigate that?
Mhm. You know, the diagnoses were bittersweet. Sweet because now I had a name and a term for what I was experiencing. I wasn't strange and weird because someone else on the planet had heard about what I was feeling and the symptoms that I had. But it was also bitter, and I experienced a considerable amount of self stigma and shame because, okay, now I've got these diagnoses. What does this mean for me? What does this mean if, for how people are going to relate to me? I didn't want anyone else to know it. And every relationship I think I've had since that point has been impacted or affected. Family, work, friendships, intimate relationships, everything has been affected because when I received the diagnoses, I received them at a time when we weren't talking about this. There weren't resources to help me navigate. There wasn't a book. that could give me the tools and the step-by-steps on how do you deal with, live with a diagnosis when that affects you so much, but at the same time, you're still high functioning, you're still accomplished. I could and have worked. How do you deal with that? And so it was challenging. I had to learn what the diagnosis meant and what the diagnosis meant for me, how my symptoms affected me and affected the people and situations in my life. It was a learning experience and it doesn't stop. It doesn't end. I'm still learning. I'm still learning me. I'm still learning ways that, the full moon might affect me. I'm still learning, because life goes on and there's different triggers. And having a diagnosis doesn't mean that the world stops for me to catch up and understand. It keeps going.
Okay. So you also mentioned that you were prescribed medication. So
Mhm.
can you elaborate just your journey with medication and whether or if you have explored alternative methods?
Mhm. The first medicine that I was prescribed was an antidepressant because at the time that I got to the psychiatrist, that was the main thing. The fainting and the panic that was on the side. I was very depressed, so I was given an antidepressant, and we quickly learned, my psychiatrist and I, that the antidepressant was not what I needed. For people diagnosed with bipolar disorder, especially for me, an antidepressant alone made me hypomanic. And we quickly learned that, okay, depression wasn't the diagnosis, it's something else. So I've been on mood stabilizer, antipsychotic, antidepressant, anti-anxiety, and a medication for sleep, because insomnia is something that I've dealt with for a very long time. At the time that I started the medication, I needed it. I needed it. And there's been several points in my 20 plus year mental health journey where I needed medication. I look at medication as something that buys me time, something that buys me time as I go through therapy, as I process loss, as I journal and figure out what's going on in my life. It buys me some time, and it buys me time where I am symptom free. When you go 3 days without sleep, it's the equivalent of you being drunk. And that has been my life at several times in my life. Medication allows me to sleep. It allows me to get some rest so that I'm able to wake up the next day and get to therapy, work, process, think. You can't think when you're tired. You can't think when you are drinking. You can't even drive when you've been up for that long. Mood stabilizer for bipolar disorder. If 5 is ideal and without symptoms, 0 would be suicidal, 10 would be hypomanic or manic. The goal is to keep you at a 5. So a mood stabilizer keeps me at a 5. It keeps me from going too far on the depression side and too high on the manic or hypomanic side. So I needed that too. Anxiety, I think for a large portion of my life, I lived with some latent anxiety and I can manage it. I don't like it, but I can manage it. What I cannot deal with is panic. And there are times that I've had upward of 3, 4, 5 panic attacks in a day. So again, medication allows me to be productive by decreasing and removing my symptoms. I have, when I'm not on medication or when I am um, on less medication, I've tried everything. I've done tapping, of course, prayer, meditation, journaling, therapy, several times of types of therapy, hypnotherapy, traditional therapy, talk therapy, trauma therapy, vitamins, supplements, changing my diet, cleansing my gut, having a purge, colonics, crystals, lavender oil, playing with puppies, grounding, being on the beach. I've done just about everything. Much of that was done out of desperation because the thing with medication is what works for me may not work for you. And what has worked for me in one season, in another season, it stops working, or I've had to increase the dosage. There was one medication where I started at 5 milligrams, and when I stopped, I was at 250 milligrams because your body gets used to it, your mind gets used to it, you get used to it. And so now you have to shift. So it has been trial and error sometimes. Some medications work immediately. Some gave me horrific nightmares. Some I had side effects of clenching my jaws and grinding my teeth, hives, acne, suicidal and homicidal thoughts. So it's been a trial and error journey. And that's one of the reasons why I share my story, because if I can lessen and shorten someone's learning curve, I want to do that. I don't want to gatekeep recovery because it's really life or death for many people.
So you mentioned that you would need to process laws. Could you explain? Are you talking about the 9/11 situation, or is there something else, or there's other situations in your life where you had to see and process laws? And do you mind sharing that?
Whew. Um, Many times in college, growing up, there were friends in high school. I had high school, and shortly after high school, I had two classmates that passed away, and that was tough. In college, I had a period of 6 months where I lost 12 people, and I was found kind of catatonic. But again, we didn't have language back then for this. So I was sent to campus ministry to talk to a priest, and and then life just moved on. Most recently, from 2019, November 2019 to the beginning of 2023, I lost about 15 people close to me, with the first person dying while I was talking to them on the phone. Also, in that period, I went through two horrific professional splits that ended with, attorneys, many broken friendships, all during that concentrated period of 2019 to 2023. So I had to deal with a lot of loss during that time. And it wasn't until about April 2022 where I recognized that I'm mean. I became mean, short tempered. I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to be around people. I cut off a lot of people. I ended many connections. I resigned from boards and task force and so many things because I didn't have it to give. I was so angry. And I saw a quote that said, I sat with my anger long enough to know that her name was grief. I didn't have time between 2019 and 2022 to really sit still and process the immense weight of loss, of grief. I didn't have time because I was working. We were in the midst of a pandemic. People still needed me. I felt responsible to continue giving and serving to my community because they needed. And that's one of the things when you are strong, that word again, when you're strong, sometimes you put your needs on the back burner because you recognize that there are other people who need you more than you need a break. And whether that's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. That's what I did. And so by the time I finally took a break, I realized just how angry I was and resentful and bitter. Like, dang it, I just gave so much. Where are the people who are showing up for me and who are able to show up for me in kind with the weight of everything that I was carrying and dealing with? I didn't have too many people who could sit with me and shoulder and carry and hold space for that much pain and that much grief. And from that came a lot of resentment and anger. And I was mean. I recognized it. And so I had to put myself in timeout. And it was a process, it was a journey. The first professional split was October of 2021. And it took me until August of this year, 2024, to really be at peace and free from it. because for a very long time I was angry, borderline enraged, wanting revenge and vengeance, wanting to have a front row seat as everyone who hurt me was punished. I wanted to do that. And so when you are diagnosed with a mental illness, and then you go through something human like betrayal, like a professional split, your diagnosis doesn't stop showing up. It's still there too. But I tell people that when you're diagnosed with a mental illness, regular life stuff, regular human stuff can push you over the edge. There are many people who get fired or quit or are forced to resign every single day. They're mad, they're upset, they take it in stride, they apply for another job, and they move on. There are also some who are hard hit like me. The difference is for me, that experience increased anxiety, increased panic attacks, increased insomnia, had many intrusive suicidal thoughts, and I intrusive, majorly intrusive. And it took a long time for me to deal with it, to process it all. And I needed help. So I went back on medication, went back to therapy, did all the forms of trauma therapy just so I could deal with it.
Yeah, yeah. I like the fact that you're able to sit here and accept responsibility on your end of how you showed up, and also
Mhm.
recognize when you're a lot of times when we're angry is because of grief. You know, there's a lot of times we feel the way we feel, and we don't understand the reason why we feel the way we feel. So
Yeah.
just the fact that you're able to sit down and really process it, that's powerful. So right now you sit here and you work with people who like, firefighters, first responders, teachers, veterans. What are some things that you notice doing your work when it comes to their mental well-being, how they process things, and how do you sit here and provide services?
Great question. I kind of stumbled onto the demographic of veterans and first responders. And that came about because I did a 3.5 month intensive outpatient treatment mental health program. And it was therapy, group therapy, 3 times a week. I was there from 9 a.m. until about 2, 3 times a week. And in one of my group therapy sessions was with active duty military. And I was shocked at first because they were all in uniform. But by me sharing my story and journey and them sharing, I realized that when it comes to mental health, what caused the challenge matters and doesn't matter because we present the same. Anxiety is anxiety, whether it is from, being in combat or from being chased by a pit bull. It's anxiety. It's the same thing. And we connected, we bonded, we shared a lot, and my love for the military was always there, but it deepened while in group therapy. And adjacent to that is the first responders. That's law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, even journalists, because they see a lot of the things that police officers and firefighters see. What they experience is they're among the strong people, the bold, the brave, the strongest of the strong. They don't get to have weakness and vulnerability. No one wants to know that the firefighter that's coming to save you is experiencing anxiety or is depressed. No one wants to hear that the people who are carrying a gun is experiencing, depression. What? Our society really doesn't give space and room for soldiers, seamen, Coast Guardsmen, Marines to be weak. That's your job. Be tough. And especially with men, be tough, be strong. You're brave, you're bold. What? We don't even want to hear that. But they're human first. And I'm grateful that I have been able to be a safe place for veterans, law enforcement, first responders to share what they're experiencing because there is a difference. And I know that I'm not the only person that can recognize the difference. There are many mental health professionals that I'm in contact with that can understand it. There's a difference between someone being suicidal and someone having suicidal thoughts. There's a difference between someone who is depressed and wants help with resolving the depression and someone who is depressed and is a potential risk to themselves or others. And so when, veterans, law enforcement especially, contact me, I'm that safe space. They know that I'm a mandatory report. And that just basically means that if I think that you are a danger to yourself or others, I have to report it. But I'm able to hear and walk them through that. And for me, that is an honor that they trust me in that way. It is, it's one of the biggest, the highest compliments that I could receive. So whether it is connecting them with a therapist who is a combat veteran or who was in law enforcement or who was a firefighter, or it is connecting them with someone who can help them process their feelings so that they can be better husbands or wives, parents at home, or whatever it is. My role is connecting them with the resources that they need because I'm a mental health coach. I'm not a therapist. So my job as a coach is to get you from today and position you to be the best you in the future. If you want to take a deep dive into your path, that's not what I do. But I know many great professionals and I can connect you with them. I That's what I do. If there's a call that needs to be made, I'm going to do that. If there's a way that I can lend my voice to support them, I will. And there's several, firefighters and law enforcement that I check up on and check in with just to make sure that they're doing well. And they do the same for me.
Okay. Okay, I like it. I like the fact that you're able to sit here and, just like point out that fact. Like, I'm not a therapist, I'm just a coach.
Mm-mm, no. And I say that because I know many coaches who cross the line, or I'll say it this way. I have seen many coaches cross the line, and I'm very clear with what I do. I considered going back to school for therapy, uh, to be a therapist, a counselor, social worker. But the reality is for me is this is my life. I am still symptomatic. And sometimes hearing pain and hearing trauma and hearing how people are hurting affects me. I'm not equipped for that. I'm equipped for knowing where you are right now and helping you move forward, helping you create the strategies and the support system so that your diagnosis or what you're experiencing right now isn't a barrier to your forward progress and life.
So, do you have any advice for anyone who struggles with their identity or mental health?
Oh, that's two things, identity and mental health. Let's start with identity first. What I wish I did was as soon as I received a mental health diagnosis, was go to therapy specific for my self-esteem. I wish I did that because my self-esteem took a hit. I was basically told I had proof, it was written there, and I felt it in my body, my symptoms, that I was defective. That's the terms that were used back then. So here I was, the girl most likely to succeed, the one who had the degree and certificates and all of these accomplishments, and have a diagnosis that nobody really wants to talk about. People will boldly say that they have cancer or that they deal with addiction, but to say bipolar disorder, what? My self-esteem took a hit and it took many years. And truth be told, I'm still dealing with that. I still deal with self-stigma. I still have to overcome shame. I still have to be intentional about reminding myself that a mental health diagnosis isn't a death sentence. It does not disqualify you from future success. It doesn't invalidate your potential. I still have to do that. And it's hardest when I am symptomatic I can have days, weeks, months where I'm just going, plugging around, no symptoms. And the first time I realized that I'm depressed and there's no reason for it, things are going well. There it is again. Or I'm anxious and I'm not being chased by a dog. I'm anxious and there's no lion around. I'm not in danger at all. Okay, here we go again. Or I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm experiencing panic. That's when I'm reminded that this diagnosis, there is no remission. And, it is what it is. So the first thing, if you're dealing any issues with identity, get to therapy because it's going to, in my opinion, exponentially fast forward your peace. Yeah, you could do it on your own. Yeah, you can journal. Yeah, you can just write and talk to yourself, etc., read books, TED Talks, all that stuff, but it's going to take longer. Get to therapy and work with someone who can help you with understanding where you are, who you are, and processing all of the things that come with that. When it comes to mental health, same thing. You know, I recommend that anyone, whether it's physical, um, behavioral, emotional, mental diagnoses, get to therapy because your self-esteem takes a hit. Then you're going to have to do a lot of research and understanding what the diagnosis is and also what that diagnosis means to you. Because everyone that has bipolar disorder or diagnosed with bipolar disorder, we aren't the same. That's a diagnosis, but then there's so much that factors into it. You got to factor in personality, life experience, birth order. Are you an Aries? Are you a Sagittarius? Where did you grow up on the globe? There's so many things that factor into that. So you need to know, what does that diagnosis mean to you? How does it show up for you? I am a huge proponent of therapists, of psychiatrists, of coaching, of faith. Faith played a tremendous role in my journey. Faith, not church. Faith. My relationship with my God. I can't tell my story without talking about faith because it was tremendous for me. However, I also experienced significant pain from church, not from faith. Faith is why I'm here talking to you. Faith is why I am comfortable and bold in sharing. But I've been hurt by church. And there are many people living with mental health diagnoses that have been hurt by church, primarily because of the spiritual bypassing. If I say I have spiritual bypassing means that we're going to ignore everything you just said, we're going to ignore everything that you feel, and we're going to hit you over the head with the Bible or Quran or whatever scripture. We're going to hit you over the head with it. So when I say that I am feeling anxious, what? Girl, you just need to fast and pray because the Bible says you should be anxious for nothing. Oh, I feel, I'm hearing like voices. I've got a lot of thoughts in my head at once. You might need deliverance, might need something cast out of you. You might, really? I am having trouble sleeping. All you got to do is say a couple Psalms. That's it. Tell God you want to sleep. Ask God, God help me sleep and put your head down and go to sleep. Why didn't I think of that? I didn't know it was that simple. But that's what happens in my experience in church settings. You're not hearing what I'm saying. You're not hearing or caring about how I hurt. You're just focused on forcing some scripture down my throat. And because you don't understand what I'm experiencing, you relegate all solutions to the Bible. And this is why I've been saying since 2016 that faith communities must make room for mental health professionals in their congregation. How do y'all have nurses? You got nurses, a nursing ministry. For if anyone falls, gets a cut, hit their head, sick, whatever, you got a whole nursing ministry because you recognize the value of having trained professionals care for the physical body. But when it comes to mental health, there's so many faith leaders that think that they know it all because they went to seminary. because they have a theology degree. Really? And that's why so many people who are experiencing mental health challenges or diagnosed with a mental illness aren't in church. Because if you don't care how I hurt, I don't care what you have to say. I don't. If you can't meet me where I am, I don't want to be. I remember I was living in New York and went to a church, and from the pulpit, the pastor was talking about crazy people, people with mental illness. Crazy. I was so hurt because that was my church. And, eventually I was able to have a conversation, and get a message to him. But the damage was done because it evidenced, let me use scripture, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. It evidenced that what he spoke was actually how he felt. He felt that people with mental illness are crazy. And I've heard that repeatedly over my life and over my time in church. And so I'm good. That's abuse. Mm-hmm.
I like that. I like that. Um, okay, so what would be a message that you would want to sit here and leave with your younger self, the little girl that was, yeah, younger self? What would be a message?
Different is okay. Different isn't even okay. Different can be your superpower. Don't allow anyone's opinion of you to be your reality. In fact, toss them. Toss all the opinions because they don't matter. What you think about yourself is what matters most. How you feel about you matters most. Friends are good, but they're not everything. Continue to foster your relationship with your God. Continue to pour into you and invest in things that make you feel good, and that it's okay to not be nice as long as you're kind. Keep being kind. It's okay to not be nice. You don't have to please everyone. You don't need the good girl title. And whatever you feel and whatever you think matters. It's valid. How you hurt is valid. Don't accept excuses that aren't given. Don't remain in places where you are shown that you aren't wanted and aren't valued. Don't fight for seats at tables. Go where there is not only a seat for you, but also a tent card with your name on it because they want you there. Difference is okay. Keep being different. And no matter what you perceive as your flaws, your quirks, your idiosyncrasies, all of that is in the jambalaya of what makes you you, and that is beautiful.
You got the bars. Okay.
That's what I would
Um,
tell me. I wish I knew all of that when I was 9.
oh, I love it. I love it. What's a quote that you like to leave with the people, and where can the people sit here and find you?
Ooh. A quote I want to leave with people and where people can connect with me. A quote I want to leave with people. Okay, first is a diagnosis is not a death sentence when it comes to mental health. Mental health is health. You can't care for everything neck down and ignore neck up. And then the last one is 2005 Divine Download. When you can no longer be held captive by the fear of revealed truth, what remains is freedom absolute. When you can no longer be held captive by the fear of revealed truth, what remains is freedom absolute. That was divinely downloaded in 2005 and has remained with me. And that was the quote, the download that allowed me to be so bold with sharing my experience. I had lived in fear for so long of anyone finding out that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder that I said, okay, no more. I'm going to share it. And the other quote, here's one more. It is from, he's a Florida state senator, Darrell Roussan. He says, if I scream my story first, you can't hurt me if you whisper it second. I'm screaming my story. Okay, Natasha has bipolar disorder. That's what she was diagnosed with. And it's all over YouTube. Google me. It's there. Okay, can't hurt me. I took all of the power out of it. So yes, those are the quotes. And I'm everywhere on social media as Natasha Pierre official. My direct messages, DMs are always open for anything mental health and substance use related. Always willing, open, ready to share on mental health because this is this fuels me. This is something, sharing my story not only reminds me of how far I've come, but it also gives me an opportunity to ensure that this message of hope, message of recovery, message of resilience can reach people who I won't ordinarily encounter because they don't cross my path. So thank you for this opportunity and thank you for getting this message out to the masses.
Well, thank you for sitting here coming on, allowing me to sit here and interview you and being vulnerable enough and far enough in your journey to sit here and be willing to sit here and share your journey and share your story.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely.
hopefully people, tune in, they hear this amazing story and, uh, you know, hopefully they tap in sooner rather than later. So, do
Absolutely.
something, and we will talk to you guys later.